The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. The following episode was recorded on June 7th, 2024. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we open the old mailbag one more time as we address a listener's question as it relates to Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, coming to visit the Congress of the United States. What does this mean? What does this mean for Netanyahu? What does it mean for support of Israel here in the United States? And what could he be coming to actually talk about when he gets here? So let's listen in. Mailbag. Of course, they're asking about the Trump trial, which I think we pretty much answered everything there's going to be answered about so far. They're asking about the Hunter Biden trial.
Yes.
And the big question was, Congress invited Benjamin Netanyahu to come speak to them. The last time they did this, Barack Obama was the president. And the Republican Congress basically just, dissed the president and just brought Netanyahu in. And the question was what we thought about Netanyahu coming to talk to Congress, what we think he's going to talk about, and what maybe the impact of that's going to be.
Well, we could speculate, I suppose.
No, and that's exactly like that was my comment. It's going to be speculation, but we probably can take a little bit from the last time he was here.
Wow. Okay. So he didn't come during the 4 years of Trump. He never came and spoke to Congress.
No.
That's amazing.
That's really interesting.
So. What Netanyahu faces right now is an interesting choice between taking his foot off of the neck of Gaza and trying to continue normal relations with Egypt, which are frayed at the moment because of the activity of the Israelis in the south of Gaza. Which is the Egyptian border, and also making inroads for the normalization deal with Saudi Arabia, which is what led to this attack on October 7th. It's more and more clear that was the trigger for this, and so Netanyahu has the ability, if he wants to pursue that deal with the Saudis, which would be a really big deal for Israel and a very smart move. It would also put Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries in charge of Gaza, which means that he doesn't have to put Israeli soldiers there on a permanent basis. I know that they've built a border on the north end of Gaza that will probably be permanent now. Takes a little chunk out of Gaza and creates a DMZ sort of, so that they can't do what they did on 10/7 again without warning. And I think that personally, I think Netanyahu should take that deal. He's been offered a sort of support from the more middle-range Israeli government officials to make up for the fact that he's going to lose if he takes this deal the hard right. He's definitely going to lose them from his coalition. Netanyahu will face an election possibly as early as the fall, and I can't imagine that the Israelis would want him to remain as PM. But stranger things, I guess, have happened. And so what he would talk to Congress about probably would be, to try to shore up support for Israel, which has been very, very difficult, on college campuses, as we've talked about, and among large segments of the American population.
But give a little clarification here. Netanyahu last spoke to Congress in 2015. He was invited by John Boehner, who at the time was the Speaker of the House. 30 members of Congress, both in the House of Representatives and Senate, skipped the address out of protest because they felt that it was a little too close to the Israeli elections, and the main topic was the Iran nuclear deal. So go ahead. There's some context.
And
the
that was
last time he was.
And that was before the deal.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember.
I have a this of course is the one area of current news that I really have not been paying that much attention to. Scott, you're the expert here. I don't know that much about the entire area or situation. What I did notice was that convicted felon Trump has made it a point, and now other far-right Republicans are saying that anybody, including like Chuck Schumer, who is Jewish, as far as I know, that if anyone criticizes Israel or Netanyahu to any extent, that person is immediately a Palestinian, and that any protest against Israel on a college campus is considered a mini Gaza. And instead of any type of reasonable, balanced debate or discussion, again, one has an extreme of you're either for Netanyahu and for Israel, and the extreme policy of whatever not Netanyahu wants to do, or Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to do, or you're for Gaza, which means you're for Hamas, and therefore you're against, you're a bad person, even if you are Jewish. And I don't know if you had heard that, or if you wanted to speak to that. I'm wondering what is going to happen when Prime Minister Netanyahu comes, given the current tensions in the United States and in Congress.
Well, my thought is this, and again, just looking at the history of Netanyahu coming here. He came here the last time in 2015. Yes, he had a direct message to make, but he was also up for re-election, and it was quite questionable whether or not he would get re-elected. There are very many people of the Jewish faith and Israelis alike that do not like Benjamin Netanyahu. Scott being one, my wife being another. Don't like him. I find it interesting that as the next election is coming up and Netanyahu is under fire, he once again comes to the United States Congress to make a speech that he might not otherwise be able to make to the Knesset. And that was the big complaint the last time Netanyahu showed up, was that this was basically a political maneuver on his part. It had nothing to do with the things he was going to be talking about. This was an attempt to bolster support by showing that the United States Congress allowed him to speak and how important he was for Israel when it came to the United States. That would... Just looking at the history, it almost makes sense.
I'm not. So first of all, I should say that I am not a Netanyahu supporter, but he lost my support. It wasn't that I started out that way. And he has been an alarmist about a number of things. He has neglected, the sort of movement towards creating some kind of peace. Very happy, I guess, with the status quo. That all blew up in his face on October 7th, and he needs to face the music for that. when he comes to Congress and he's going to talk about anti-Semitism, probably on the part of progressives in the United States of America, and how soft the support is for Israel, for the only democracy in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to listen, Brooke, to the right wingers who make these declarations about like either you're for 100% for Israel or you're for the Palestinians, because the Israelis themselves have been protesting Netanyahu before he even got back into office last year. And he has comported himself disgracefully. They don't seem to mind that, of course, whether it's here or there. And I do think it's, we should listen to what he has to say, but we should also understand that he's got a particular viewpoint, which is 100% at this point saving his ass and very little to do with what is good for Israel. And that anybody who just goes along with that blindly is not doing what is in the best interest of Israel or the cause of peace or democracy around the world, but is supporting a wannabe dictator who's been in power way too long in Israel.
And the second part of that question and again, the person that wrote in about this was very up on their history. When Netanyahu visited in 2015, there was a significant worsening of the relationship between the Israeli prime minister and the president of the United States, who at that time was Barack Obama. It did not seem to play a factor if this was, in fact, a political stunt to gain support at home by being a friend of the United States. However, President Biden is a completely different president. Do you think it will play the same way? Because it is reasonable to, you'll have to excuse me, I'm trying to read through this thing. It is reasonable to assume that the relationship between Biden and Netanyahu, which is already strained, might become even more so. Will that hurt him at home?
Will that hurt Bibi at home?
No, Netanyahu.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything that Netanyahu can do anymore to save
hurt himself any more than he already has.
Yeah, a lot of things still need to be investigated and proven, probably in court, whether he did actively support Hamas because they were a more palatable opposition than the PA is in the West Bank, because they don't want a two-state solution, and neither does he. So he made common cause with them. Of course, that bit him in the butt, as I've said before. I don't think there's anything that Netanyahu can do to save his ass in Israel at this point. He's going to have to stand tall before the man and discuss his actions and inactions in the lead up to 10/7. We're not talking about how he's conducted this war in Gaza. We're talking about what happened before that. And that's what he really needs to be held accountable for, in my mind. How he's conducted the war is something that I'm not going to comment on too much, because I'm obviously not there and I don't know what the situation on the ground is. From a policy standpoint, the number one objective there should be getting those hostages home. I mean, three or four more of them were found dead. It appears that Hamas, in their disgusting way, was taking dead bodies back and declaring them alive and hostages when they knew that they were dead. It is that bad faith, a group. And there's very little to negotiate with. But if there are any hostages left alive in Gaza, they need to get home. And so phase one of this plan, that was an Israeli plan that Biden talked about last week before they could, just simply kill it in the highest reaches of the government because the right wingers don't like it. But the phase one of that plan is the easy part. Phase two is very difficult, and phase three is probably pie in the sky. But phase one is get the hostages home, as many of them as you can, and withdraw your troops from Gaza. It doesn't mean that you can't monitor what's going on there. It doesn't mean that you can't, follow the movements. I'm sure that there's plenty of intelligence because the people of Gaza don't like Hamas, and I'm sure there's human intelligence that is available to both the United States and Israel. But the first things first, get those hostages home.
How
I'll
long
keep
is?
talking. Oh, there you go.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Brooke had to get off a mute.
Yeah,
it was a long pause, and I was like, I can continue talking.
what I had wanted to ask was, how long is Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I began to dislike him intensely when the settlements were going up in the West Bank, and they were illegal settlements from the Palestinian perspective. And he was encouraging them, and I thought this is going to lead to disaster and conflict, and no one is stopping this man from doing anything. And anyway, how long will Prime Minister Netanyahu be here for? And what happens when he goes home? I mean, you're saying that he will definitely be tried in court, or can he simply go into exile somewhere where he is untouchable?
Well, I don't think he's going into exile or anything like that. But I think people have to remember that before October, Netanyahu was being protested almost nightly in Israel. I think maybe nightly in Israel for trying to limit the effect of the Supreme Court there because of the parliamentary system that they have. They only have two branches of government. The executive branch and the legislative branch are the same. They're not separate as we try to make it here. And so the judiciary is the only opposition to or check and balance to the executive slash legislative branch. And he's been accused of corruption and faces a trial, but he doesn't want to have that trial, of course. And he wouldn't be the first Israeli leader to face that. So he was trying to essentially neuter the judiciary, and people were protesting that long before the October attacks. So he's not. I don't think he doesn't have a long future as the PM there. I can't imagine that the Israelis may not want to change leaders during the war, although I think that they may have to if they want to end the war. But the coalition that he put together will certainly fall apart. It is not a robust coalition. He has made concessions to the right orthodox, ultra orthodox wing of the parties that form his coalition that he's not going to be able to keep together. And that means that there's a chance that a more moderate government comes in. The last time they did that, they did so with an Arab Israeli party in the coalition. The Arab Israelis left that coalition, the government fell apart because things weren't moving fast enough to suit them. Not everybody loves democracy because it's not the fastest form of government in the world. And so it's unclear, of course, who will be the next prime minister of Israel. But I do not believe that it will be Bibi Netanyahu.
All right. So in the chat and in our chat here, you will see a picture that I posted because this was on the email, and it shows John Boehner, and at that time, Vice President Biden, almost 10 years younger. And Biden does not look to be the happiest person on the face of the earth as he's sitting and listening to Netanyahu's speech, because again, this did cause a bit of a rift with Obama. So
but Mark, can I clarify that? Because
sure.
Because Biden, as vice president, went to Israel to speak to Bibi Netanyahu, and on the day he arrived, they began groundbreaking on new settlements that they had sworn they would not do.
Right.
And so that basically slap in the face to Joe Biden was the reason for Biden's unhappiness in 2015. And Biden's a canny politician and has, made peace with people that he would otherwise despise probably prior to Bibi Netanyahu. But he when he went over there after October 7th and he gave Bibi a hug, I think that was a big step in their relationship, but there's nothing permanent here.
No.
There are no enduring policies. There are only enduring interests. And as long as Bibi is the leader of Israel, Biden's going to support him to an extent with a hug. And, the hug kind of also symbolizes the idea that you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And that Bibi as an enemy of the Biden or the Democrats or moderates around the world or peace-loving people or people who believe in democracy. Again, it seems to me that the biggest problem with Bibi is that he's been in power for way too long. 20 years as the prime minister of Israel is way too long for a democracy. Things need to change. And, he's been out and he's been back, so it's not been continuous, but it is not a healthy situation for Israel anymore to have him as prime minister.
No, I just saw this as an interesting visual that, of course, Biden was there, even though the president is not there. And it was just an interesting visual to see. And I do remember the hug he gave to Bibi. And it's important to remember that may be as much a visual as it was something sincere. We don't know. Because you're right. Biden's a pretty cagey politician. He's got to play the part. The last part of this question is about Netanyahu's coming over. Considering the support that the United States public has, and I'm going to say this, I'm not sure that the support that the writer of this email believes exists is as widespread as they believe it is. Considering the support that Israel has, and with Netanyahu being the prime minister, do you think that the Republicans inviting the prime minister of Israel to come speak to them is a political move that will help them in the election in 2024? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to register. Again, I think that the writer believes that there's far more, almost unconditional support that exists. I think I don't think that's the case. Go ahead, bro. I'm exposing the fact that I have not been paying attention to this aspect of the news. Is Netanyahu speaking to all of Congress or only to Republicans? All Congress is invited.
Okay. So everybody's invited, but not everybody has to show up, correct? So those who do not appear then are also then making a statement.
Which is what happened in 2015. 60 of them, I think it was 60, chose not to attend. 6 of them were senators.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders, I believe, was one of them, and he lived in Israel for a while.
Right.
But does not support Bibi Netanyahu.
Right. So then it's possible then that very, very few Democrats might show up, and this might be only Republicans, possibly. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because
I think that they're
um,
going to. I think that they're going to show up. I don't know how many people would stay away this time because the things are more interesting in the Middle East now than they were even in 2015. But there's some people who are saying that they want to disrupt his speech, and there are people who, who want to boycott it altogether. I think you generally go to these speeches for the most part, and that they're going to try to stop the people who want to disrupt it as best they can. And if they don't want to go, they don't have to go. The question of whether this will help Republicans
who
is an
wants to
interest.
interrupt me? Sorry, I just don't want to forget that point. Don't forget what you're saying. But who is saying that they're interested in disrupting? And is this something that the public is allowed to attend to also, like up in the gallery?
That I don't know, but
The public is allowed to attend, but there are very limited tickets to it. I mean, the public is allowed to attend Congress sessions whenever they want. There's a gallery. It's the people's house. In this case, you're probably not. It's going to be a by invitation only kind of thing because there's only so much seating. If you've never been to the House of Representatives and saw the building, I mean, it's an absolutely gorgeous building. It isn't as big as it looks on television. It's sort of like Doctor Who. It's not bigger on the inside. I mean, it really is confined a little bit.
I didn't know that. I thought it was a big room because that's where they do the joint sessions and stuff.
And
right?
don't get me wrong, it is a big room, but when you look at it on television, it appears to be this like massive, massive thing. And there is limited seating. There's limited seating in the House of Representatives, and the gallery is limited. Now, the gallery, if I remember correctly, is 10 rows deep and goes all the way around the semicircle. If you can put maybe 500, maybe, and I could be wrong about that, but just by making the estimate, maybe 500, which doesn't seem like a lot. But go ahead with your point, Scott.
So a number of people in the progressive wing of the progressive caucus of Congress have suggested that they would go and try to be disruptive. I hope that they don't do that. It would probably be really silly. If they want to boycott it, other people will be glad to take those seats. But it's that progressive wing of the party that includes, Pramila Jayapal and Mark Pocan and Elon, Mark help me here, Omar, that group. I mean, there's a Palestinian in that group, and obviously she supports her people, and I think that that's understandable. But boycotting as 58 or whatever did last time is one thing. It's probably a useless statement to make. They get elected to do these things, no matter how painful they may be. And again, I'd certainly be willing to hear them out. Netanyahu going there is going to help raise funds for Republicans. There's little doubt about that. Sheldon Adelson's widow probably is, one of the richest women in the world. She's going to be donating lots and lots of money to Republicans. There are others who are going to do that, who are so pro-Israel they don't care that Israel could be committing suicide. That's how pro-Israel they are. And they'll continue to support Republicans that they think are on that side, including Donald Trump, who, has never found anything that Israel has done to be egregious in any way. Right.
And I would agree with that. I don't think it's going to help Republicans. It might help them, a little bit of the fundraising. Those who boycotted the last time around, if you look at the list, pretty much people that were safe in their district. it was safe for them to say, no, I'm protesting the fact. Bernie Sanders is a good example. I'm protesting the fact that he's come. It did not it would not have impacted their political future. There are probably a whole bunch that didn't want to come, but are in more not quite as safe districts that didn't want to have that being a talking point against them. Politics is politics, so you have to, bite the bullet and go do what you're going to do. To the idea of people disrupting, the only thing I could say to that progressive wing is don't be space laser green. I mean, we all, if you don't know that doesn't work and how silly it looks, just don't be that. I mean, come on, let's take the conversation a little higher than being disruptive. I mean, it just makes no sense. So hopefully we have answered that question. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Podkite, who does all our analytics, iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source of music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershworth, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.